You know, we are in day 15 of our Mule advanced training. Earlier we understood about Git basics. Now, before we go on to CI/CD using Mule, etc., I want you to focus on some best practices to be followed. Actually, this is very small thing, but it will make a big difference in your applications. And in interviews, they will ask you a lot. So watch this video completely until end. Initially, you might see something which you already know. So please continuously watch until the end so that you'll understand about the best practices like what is this Maven resource filtering, how to actually reduce the redundant configurations by using parent POM, what is BOM, etc. We'll see. And later today, we'll also see how to actually create a shared application and how to create a template project for your team. Okay, these are the best practices. Please watch until the end, even though you might feel you know most of the things. Okay, so let's get started. Normally, what we do is whenever we're developing APIs, we first design API specification in Design Center or maybe in Studio as well, and then publish it to Exchange. Once your API specifications are published to Exchange, then what we do is in any point studio, we develop or we implement that specification. Now we are going to see the best practices while implementing the specification. So actually, in my documents, this is day 15 document in my Git repository. I've given you an API specification YAML file. Actually, I have exported this YAML from my Exchange, and this is zip file given to you. I will not be creating a new YAML right now because that is not the topic. You already know how to create YAML. We'll import this YAML into our design center, publish it to Exchange, and then we'll see. Okay. So actually, if I go to my Anypoint Studio, so if I go to anypoint.mulesoft.com, I'll go to Design Center. Already, I have imported all my APIs. They are there. In case if you want to know how to import them, just click on Create, import the file. You just have to select the zip file given by me and give the name. That's all, it will be imported. Already, I have imported the APIs. Already my APIs are present in Design Center and I have published them to Exchange. So in Exchange also, you should be able to see my API. This is a restaurant system API. You don't need to understand what is the functionality here. This is an API. And let me remove this. Okay, so you can see these are the endpoints. There are a lot of endpoints. You don't need to know what these are doing. I'll just publish it to Exchange again as a new version. So already I have different asset versions. Right now, the current asset version which I'm publishing is 1.0.2. I'll publish it. Then once it is published to Exchange, I want to start implementing it in my Anypoint Studio. Okay, I will actually delete the existing ones so that I can show you freshly. I'll create a new project. I'll give any name like SW restaurants SAPI IMPL. And I'm going to actually add the API from Exchange. I'll select from Exchange and I'll select SW. My API is starting with SW. Okay, this is my restaurant API. I will add. Actually, I hope you know this will be added as a dependency to my Maven project. This dependency has to be downloaded from the Maven repository of Anypoint platform. So as this is your API belonging to your organization, for Maven to download, it needs a credentials. It needs a way to log in. So Before you finish, actually, you need to know one thing. In the .m2 folder inside settings, we have to configure server with ID anypoint exchange v3, and this is the username and password of my anypoint platform account. Actually, it is not a good practice to use plain username and password. We use something called as client ID and secret. So for using this client ID and secret, we have to create something called as a connected app. We'll discuss about that connected app later. Make sure that in your settings.xml under your .m2 folder, you have configured the credentials to your anypoint platform account. Then only Maven will be able to download the dependency from the anypoint Maven repository. I'll finish it. Okay, actually, I've given this settings.xml also in my repository in day 15. You can actually copy the settings.xml and modify your credentials in settings.xml. Okay, I'll finish. This will take some time. Let it create a project. Okay, as you know, all the flows will be automatically generated. Fine. Now, I wanted to do implementation, but before I do implementation, actually, I know that this is a system API talking to database. So I need to configure a database connector and configure my database connector configuration. So for that, I need to add database module. Okay. Then I need to configure the global element, the database connector configuration. And you know that it is better always to configure in globals XML. So instead of me creating again, I'll copy paste and I will explain it. This is my globals XML. And here in global XML, I have this database config where I have not hard coded the values. I have externalized it to a YAML file. Okay. Here I'm using placeholders. Here it is showing an error. I need to configure the JDBC driver as a Maven dependency. I will configure it. Fine. Now, as I have placeholders, I need to give values for placeholders in the YAML file. And you know, for different environments, you need to configure different YAML files. So I have already configured them. These are the two things. Let me copy paste into src main resources. This properties-dev.yaml contains the credentials to connect to local database, and properties-prod.yaml contains the credentials to connect to my cloud database, which I have. Okay. But if you have anything which is common to both environments, you can keep it inside properties.yaml. Fine. Now, anything which is common to both environments, you should have it inside properties.yaml. Now, as we have multiple properties in global elements, we need to configure configuration properties, right? Let me show you in XML how I have configured the configuration properties. Remember, whenever you are having multiple YAML files, the order of properties is important. Your environment specific YAML file should be given more priority, right? That should be the one which should be first in your configuration. So whatever configuration properties comes first, if the key is present, then it will be retrieved from this YAML. So the environment specific YAML file should be first, then the general one. And then I'm also using secure configuration properties. Actually, if you see my dev.yaml, here password should not be there. Password I want to encrypt. Okay, I'll remove password from the here also. So I have already encrypted my passwords and I have created the corresponding YAML files as well. I'll paste them into my src main resources. Here you can see properties-dev-secure. This is the encrypted password. And while creating encrypted password, I have used Mulesoft as a key. And this is the encrypted password for my cloud database. So if you see the global elements, secure properties config is not recognized. So one thing I have to do is I have to add secure properties as well here. I'll just search for secure. Okay, here is secure configuration module. I added, finish. Now, if you see, I have configured secure configuration properties as well, and it is pointing to properties dash $env. This is a environment specific value. And if you see the default value of env, I have given as prod. Okay, everything is fine. Let me test the connection. As I've given the default value of env as prod, it will try to retrieve from uh, properties dash prod.yaml, and now the connection is successful. So everything is fine. Now we have externalized everything. So good practice to externalize. And one thing to remember is when you have multiple configuration properties, the YAML file specific to your environment should be the first, then the generic one, right? That is one thing to be understood. And one more thing is in my globals XML, I have configured the common errors I know about my application. I have not yet implemented because I know that these are the standard errors I'll be throwing within my application. The global error handler for them is configured here. All right. So this is my globals. And one more thing we need to do is in the generated XML, this HTTP listener and API kit config also needs to be placed inside global. So I'll cut it and paste. I'll go to XML and paste them here. Fine. So these also are the global elements that are common. So I kept inside globals.xml. Fine. Now, one more thing is if you see the API kit config, it is pointing to my RAML present inside the zip. If you see, it is pointing to resource : This is my organization ID. All right. So actually, how do I know the organization ID? I will go to access management of my Nippon platform and business groups. This is my business group. And here is my group ID. This is a business group ID or the organization ID. Starting with EA8. Is it the same? Yes. So for my RAML, the group ID is this one, artifact ID, and the version. So in the API kit config, actually, this is hard coded. What if my RAML version changes to 1.0.3? I have to change it by coming to XML. Again, it is not a good practice to actually hard code these values. So what I have done is I have written one more file called as properties.yaml. Here, if you see, I have configured already API.groupID. This is a group ID of my organization. If you are importing my RAML, you have to replace it with your org ID. This is my artifact ID and version. And I have also configured API.spec as resource : right? So what I could do is here, instead of hard coding everything for this API, I will remove all this and I'll simply write $API.spec. So I have externalized everything to the YAML file, right? In this YAML file also, if you see, it is loaded. It is configured as a global element. Okay, this will be loaded. Fine. So that's a good practice to externalize. Good. Now we understood about externalization. Let us run this application and check if it is working fine or not till now. So let us go ahead and check here in the pom.xml. What is the version actually? In the pom.xml, it is 1.0.2, and here also in my YAML, I'll configure as 1.0.2. I want to point to the latest version, right? This YAML file I have copy pasted, so right now the version is changed. I change it here. Good. Now let me deploy and check if everything is working, so that if it is working, I can show something. You'll have a good learning right now. Let us see whether it will work or not. You're going to see some common error. I got an error. What is it saying? This error app colon does not exist. Is not, it's not found. Oh, see, actually, whenever we are defining our own custom errors in the error handler, these should be raised somewhere within our code. Then only they will be defined. So to make sure that this error is gone, what I will do is I'll drag and drop a raise error in a separate flow and raise this error. App colon does not exist. Just to make sure that the compilation will happen. Actually, in our implementation, we'll be raising separately. Anyways, in the implementation, this is not required, but to just make sure that the compilation will be successful, I am raising the errors. Good. Now, let us see if it deploys perfectly. Okay, it got deployed successfully. Now, let us see some more problems actually and come up with some best practices. If you see the YAML file, here I have the group ID, artifact ID, and version of my YAML. What if tomorrow I want to actually use a new version of this YAML? For example, let us go to Anypoint Studio, Anypoint platform, Design Center. Assume that the specification changes. For example, so here I'll just add one more endpoint just for demonstration /hello, and I'll give a method description get. So there's a new endpoint which I added to my YAML. So it should appear here. Let us wait. Yes. So since I have modified my YAML, I'll publish it to the exchange. So the new asset version will be 1.0.3. Now, as I want to use a new version, what all changes I need to do? First thing is in my pom.xml, I should go and change the version as 1.0.3. Okay. Let me wait and check if publishing is done. Yeah. So just see right now in the dependencies it is 1.0.2. Now I'm saving. So it automatically download 1.0.3. Yes, it is now pointing to the new YAML. Fine. So then one more change we have to do. Of course, we have to regenerate the flows so that new flows will be generated. Right click, generate flows. It will generate the flows. And one more thing is in the YAML file, I need to go and change here again to 1.0.3. Oh, if I want to change my YAML version, I need to make changes at two places. Is it? Not a good idea. So what I want to do is actually whatever versions I use in POM, that should be automatically reflected here. So see here, we're going to discuss about something called as Maven resource configuration. Let us see. In my pom.xml, I will configure a group ID as a property. So what I will do is I'll configure API dot group ID, And I will paste this API.artifact ID. And similarly, version. I'll create all this API.artifact ID. This is a one. API.version 1.0.3. So now what I have to do is, instead of hard coding the values here, I will use a placeholder dollar API.group ID. Again, dollar API.artifact ID and dollar API.version. Fine. Now, if I want to change anything, I just change in the properties of the form. Good. But again, in the YAML file also I need to change, right? What I want is here, instead of hard coding, I want these values to be populated from the value properties in my form file. So see what I'm going to do. I'll just write here dollar API dot group ID. This is nothing but the property name, whatever I configured, API dot group ID, and whatever I configured here, I will write dollar API dot artifact ID, and here dollar API dot version. So what I want is, again, I'm not hard coding in the YAML file. I'm giving a placeholder, and during build phase, whatever values are there for these properties in the form, that values I want to be coming here. So for that, there's a plugin of Maven called as Maven Resources plugin. So what we need to do is, we'll to configure a Maven Resources plugin. I'll just copy paste Maven Resources plugin. This documentation also will be available in my Git repository. So I'll just copy paste right now and I'll tell you. Under build plugins, I'll paste it. Yep. Now you can see I have configured something called as Maven Resource plugin, and I have configured a folder, a directory, src main resources, and I'm saying that do filtering of properties in this directory. And what files to include? Properties.yaml and also properties-star.yaml. Or I could have just given properties-star.yaml, that's fine. So what I'm saying is, in properties.yaml or properties-dev or whatever, if there are placeholders whose placeholder name is same as a property, they should be replaced. So this is the configuration of Maven Resources plugin. I have included these files, and let us see now. I'll try to build. Okay, let me run and see what happens. Okay, deployed successfully. Now, one thing I want you to observe, actually, the Maven plugin will replace these placeholder values with actual values during the build phase. Let us see what is happening. I'll refresh this project. Actually, I'll go to the folder of my project. This is the folder of my project. In the target folder, it contains the Maven build result classes. If you see the properties.yaml, do you see the actual values are replaced? Then these replaced values, this replaced YAML files will be used while creating the jar. So even before the jar is created, even the jar is built, Maven resource plugin will replace the placeholders with actual values. So what is the advantage right now? If in case, if I want to change the dependency of my RAML, here also I'm not hard coding, I'm using placeholders. What all I have to do is I just have to go here and change this. And of course, while building, you can pass these values also dynamically through command line. So suppose if while doing a Maven build, for example, here I'll open a CMD. And whenever I'm doing a build, Maven package, whatever, I can actually pass the environment variable -d, -d. Suppose if I want to pass a different version, API.version is equals to 1.0.4. I can pass the values of placeholders dynamically during deployment. So the same thing will be affected here. So that is the purpose of resource filtering. Okay. So in my next lecture, we'll discuss more about parent POM and BOM. I'll see you in the next lecture.